Michelle Martinko, 18, was a senior at Cedar Rapids Kennedy High School in 1979. She had blonde hair that was always styled to resemble Farrah Fawcett's. Michelle excelled in both academic and extracurricular activities. As a sophomore, she joined the twirling squad. During football halftime shows, she twirled her baton. Michelle performed in theater productions and sang in the Kennedy Women's Choir and the Concert Choir. After high school, she planned to attend Iowa State University to study interior design. On the evening of December the 19th, just 6 days before Christmas in 1979, after attending a choir banquet at the downtown Sheraton Hotel, Martinko went to Westdale Mall on the south side of Cedar Rapids. She had $180 and was in the market for a new winter coat. She asked her close friend and fellow twirler, Jane Hanson, if she wanted to join, but Hanson declined because she needed to catch up on her homework. Martinko was spotted at the mall that night, according to witnesses. No one recalls seeing her after 8 p.m. when she was seen outside a jewelry store. Martinko's parents became concerned when she did not return home by 2 a.m. They called the police, and officers immediately went to look for the teenager. They discovered the Martinko family's 1972 tan Buick in the northeast corner of the Westdale Mall parking lot near J.C. Penney. Around 4 a.m., Martinko was inside, stabbed to death. In 1979, Charles Jelinek was appointed captain of the CRPD's Detective Bureau and was one of the officers who responded to Martinko's case. He informed the victim's parents that her body had been discovered. Charles passed away in 2017, but his daughter, Sue Jelinek, recalls her father's description of the crime scene. Michelle was dressed in a rabbit fur coat. The car was strewn with bloody rabbit hair. Michelle slumped over the Buick passenger seat, leaning against the car door. Martinko had been stabbed in the face, neck, and chest 21 times. Her hands were covered in defensive wounds, which investigators interpreted as her attempt to fight off her attacker. The medical examiner stated that the murder weapon was sharp-pointed, but was not sure if it was a knife. The victim was not robbed or assaulted. Based on the location and the number of stab wounds, officers described the crime scene as personal in nature. There was no blood outside the car or on the pavement. Investigators concluded that the murder occurred while she was inside. Because the killer left no fingerprints, police assumed they were wearing gloves. Andy Seidel was Michelle's boyfriend. Michelle and Andy dated for 2 years before calling it quits. Michelle was the one who wanted to end the relationship. She later dated another boy named Mike Myrick, but Andy was not ready to let her go. After they broke up, he became obsessed with her every move, with whom she was dating and why she was dating that particular person. Michelle attended the choir end-of-year celebration and then went to the mall on the night she died. She ran into a few of her high school friends as well as Andy at the mall. Andy later testified in court that he went to the mall to get Michelle a Christmas present. He stated that she seemed happy. Curtis Thomas, another boy who knew Michelle, saw her leave the mall just before closing. I recall her smile, he explained, the goodbye smile. The murder shook the town of 110,000 people. A crime like that was unheard of in Cedar Rapids. Andy's behavior at Michelle's funeral raised suspicion. Michelle's friend, Gail Dawson, recalls him being almost in the casket. Police interrogated Andy. However, his mother provided him with an alibi. Seidel had returned home from the mall by the time Michelle was murdered. Many people, including Michelle's family and friends, expected Andy to be charged. Andy was not charged with anything. He left Cedar Rapids to serve in the Navy. No one was charged in Michelle's death. Janet and Albert, Michelle's parents, died in the 1990s, believing Andy had murdered their daughter. The case was reopened in 2005 by Detective Doug Larson, who went to school with Michelle. I felt a responsibility toward my classmates to get this case solved, he told CBS. He noticed a blood sample was taken from the car's gear stick and sent it away for testing. That blood, as well as a spot on Michelle's dress, came from her attacker. The man became cut while Michelle fought him. The police now had a complete DNA profile on the murderer. The profile did not match any criminals in the national database. Detective Larson started testing locals. Eventually, he convinced Andy to provide a DNA sample. There was no match. Andy was not the killer. Detective Larson delegated the investigation to Detective Matt Dillinger, whose father, Harvey, was one of the original investigators. Detective Dillinger learned in 2018 that genetic genealogy was used to track down the Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo. He realized that this could be the only way to find out who had murdered Michelle. A search of the public national DNA database led to the identification of Brandy Jennings, a woman from Vancouver. Brandy was an office manager and a single mother. Miss Jennings did not know she was a relative of Michelle's murderer. She uploaded her DNA to the database to learn more about her father's family. My father died in 2009. My parents divorced when I was 4.5 years old. We moved out of state, so I didn't know my father that well, she explained to KGW8. Brandy said she was glad to know that her DNA would help lead to the killer. I cannot imagine being the family and not knowing for 39 years what happened, she added. In Iowa, there are 3 brothers named Donald, Kenneth, and Jerry Burns. Brandy was their first cousin twice removed. Detectives suspected that one of the 3 was Michelle's assassin. They took DNA samples and collected drinking straws and a used toothbrush from the brothers. Jerry Burns' DNA matched perfectly. The chances were 1 in 100 billion. Burns was a successful businessman living in Manchester, Iowa. He was married and had children. There was no link between him and Michelle. On December the 19th, 2018, 6 days before Christmas, Detective Dillinger entered Burns' workplace and began questioning him about Michelle's murder. Burns claimed he had no idea why his DNA was discovered at the crime scene. Later, when Detective Dillinger asked if it were possible he did not remember it, Burns replied, "I am sure something like that would be possible to block out. You block things out of your memories." Burns was arrested and charged with murder based on DNA evidence. His family was in complete shock. The trial began in February of 2020. The jury only took 3 hours to convict Burns. As the verdict was read aloud in court, his family sat quietly. Michelle's 70-year-old older sister, Janelle, hugged her husband, John. "We do not know the whys and some of the details, but we know who did it, and that was incredibly important to us," Janelle said. "I wish my parents were here to witness this." They did not want to celebrate because the Burns family was going through a difficult time. Later, Janelle and John told KCRG that it was Michelle who had caught her killer. In a way, Michelle was there at that trial. Janelle Janelle said. She was there because she fought so hard and struggled, and she fought to the degree that she caused the killer to cut himself. And with that cut, he left his blood, and with that blood, he left his DNA, which solved the mystery. This is a heartbreaking story. Michelle was still a baby and scrubbed in sunshine. Her entire life was playing out in front of her. Her mother endured a great deal of suffering over the years. Following Michelle's death, she received prank calls. Local teenage girls mocked her mother and asked where Michelle was. They burst out laughing and hung up when Jeanette said her daughter had died. Perhaps as adults, they felt guilty for doing this to her family. Michelle's parents never recovered from the loss of their daughter. Christmas was never the same. Janelle, her older sister, was forever heartbroken. There was a void in their lives that could never be filled. Andy and Curtis lived under a cloud of suspicion for years. The town always thought one of them had something to do with it. This story is sad all the way around. No life went untouched for all that were involved. I'm angry that Jerry Burns did what he did. However, there is something sad about an elderly gentleman in bad health spending his golden years in prison. He brought it upon himself. The pain his family went through knowing he was a monster. Many cases are solved thanks to genealogy testing. I hope to see many more cold cases solved in the future. Let us all hold our babies close tonight and be grateful for what we have. Tell me what you think about this case in the comments below.